Good afternoon and welcome to the third PEO Aviation virtual town hall via Facebook live stream. Appreciate everybody joining us again for this one. This is our third PEO, but the second one with Colonel Barry and myself. And so I appreciate Colonel Barry joining us again today. And we appreciate all the great interaction and comments that we had last time that we did the Facebook live stream. We also appreciate some of the hecklers, especially Colonel Barry's wife, who chastised us because she didn't feel that the distance was sufficient enough. I want to make sure you guys understand we measured the 6 feet. It is 6 feet. The distances are deceiving as by the fact that I actually look incredibly thin in the video feed right now as opposed to how I normally am and how I actually am. So with that, we look forward to your questions again as we go through this.
Great to be here again, and appreciate everyone joining us. We look forward to updating our team on where we stand, and as ever, remain humbled to serve with you all. And on a daily basis, both Mr. Mason and I are impressed by how our team continues to execute the mission. So pleasure to be here. My kids were less than impressed, I'm afraid, with Facebook. I think they look at that as some antiquated version of their social media. So they were asking about Instagram and Snapchat, and I believe TikTok was the other one. I told them we're going to stick with Facebook because that seems to work. So pleasure to be here with everyone, and look forward to today's engagement.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so this time we do have our phones all on silent and vibrate, so we perhaps won't have any interruptions from that. But it was a good interruption last time, a good family call, and family is absolutely essential. All the time, and especially as we're going through this together, and the importance of our families, and I think this has reinforced that to all of us. And so, when you think of the PEO, I think of the PEO family, and to echo what Colonel Barry said, it is a great family to be part of. I am proud of the work that this team has done and continues to do. And so what we want to do today is really what we've done the last 3 times, or the last 2 times, which is give you a quick update on where we stand with Army, the garrison, and our senior mission commanders' policies that are out there, answer some of your questions, and then do a wrap-up as we go through this. So again, please keep your questions streaming through. We've got them on the board, and they will come up as well. So I know there's been a lot of questions right off the bat on as we continue our telework, and with the Safer at Home order that stays in place through 22 May, where are we going as we proceed? Well, what I will tell you right now is I know the garrison had a town hall earlier this morning. There's going to be some follow-on meetings from that. But we still see telework being maximized right now. We see telework being maximized because you've been able to execute under telework. And then as we do start to bring folks back in off of telework, we're going to do it in a very prudent manner that ensures our first priority, which is the safety of the workforce, the second priority, which is fighting the virus, and our third priority, which is executing the mission. And quite honestly, we believe that we can do those 3 successfully, and we are demonstrating how we're doing that successfully today. And Colonel Barry will cover a little bit of that in just a moment. Really the last thing that I just wanted to cover just in some of the opening comments about the policies and where we're going is that there were questions of, am I going to have to come back to work right away? And what I can tell you is that as we phase back in, you will be given a 7-day notification from your supervisor. So your supervisor will contact you and let you know that there are plans for you to come back into work on a full-time basis where you'll be in the office to go do that. Now, I say full-time basis because I want to make sure that folks understand if there's a need for you to come in today, you can still come in today. You follow the procedures and protocols that we put in place. You go in and you do the work that needs to be done, and then you can leave right after that in accordance with what your supervisor states. An example of that is if you've got to get on a certain computer system or you need access into a certain VTC system, and certainly we see that activity going on daily in the PEO. But again, we're going to stay in max telework until we see the conditions set for when we start to bring folks back in, and we will give you 7 days notification from the time your supervisor notifies you. So, Colonel Barry?
So if there's one thing we've learned throughout this 9 weeks now of max telework is that we're able to execute our mission in a large degree while we're in a telework status. So I think we've continued to show that over and over. And just recently, to share with folks what the workforce has been doing, we participated in the Forces Command, ForceCom monthly aviation review this week, and several units acknowledging the work that PEO Aviation has done despite many of the restrictions to travel, still able to execute fielding and training. So Apache specifically was called out, as was Aviation Mission Systems Architecture, with their ability to continue to field, accomplishing that within all the guidelines and restrictions that we have. So appreciate that. The other thing that really comes to light, participating in meetings and hearing what the PM's activities are, is this team concept, right? That it's not just PEO Aviation, but as we talk about in all of our presentations and discussions with stakeholders, this notion that we are part of a larger enterprise in aviation, and our contracts and our ability to execute the rest of our mission through test, contracts, airworthiness with our brothers and sisters over at SRD. We are sustaining all of that activity while we're on max telework. So to reinforce what Mr. Mason said, there is no urgency to draw the workforce back in large fashion. And while that exists, and while we remain under the challenges that the virus has presented, we will continue to maximize that telework. So my thanks to everyone for their ability to acknowledge that team and to continue to work and execute missions, whether it's contracts, whether it's airworthiness, whether it's training, fielding, whatever it is that you need to do, you're finding ways to accomplish it. And we look forward to continuing to resource your ability to do that and to the maximum extent possible, allow you to continue to be a vital member of the aviation enterprise. So I think with that, I'll transition. We've had some questions pre-submitted, so we'll hit those, and then I can see they're already starting to come in online. We'll hit questions and make sure we address some of the concerns that folks have. So first question, will the policy be changed to unlock camera functions on laptops in order to utilize video conferencing? So that's a really good question. We're looking at all options that we have available. It really comes down to a bandwidth challenge within our network, managing if we had multiple videos running, how we would handle that within the network. What I will tell you is I agree, right, and I got tired of looking at screens full of people's initials, and there are ways to utilize handheld devices and other mobile devices that you have, even within network applications. So specifically, Microsoft Teams, you can have that app on a phone and use that video and even use that microphone while you tie into a Microsoft Teams effort. You can do that. There's also a FedRAMP version of WebEx now, where you can tie in, you can have that app on your phone or mobile device and use video on that and or the microphone to tie into a meeting that may have slides being pushed via online devices. So multiple ways you can do it. What I think I'd really encourage everyone to do is to continue to experiment and innovate. There are lots of ways to do it. One of the frustrations we talked about yesterday was it seems like no matter what method I'm using, the process never repeats itself. I'm always doing something different to get at a meeting, and somehow I wind up getting there. And I think over time we'll continue to refine that. So it's a good question, really a bandwidth challenge that we have on the ability to use the cameras that are specifically on our laptops. We're looking at alternatives, and we'll continue to pursue any innovative approach towards that. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, and I will just add on, there was a question that came in late on last Facebook session, which was on telework as a whole and the success of telework and where we would go moving forward. And I think to Colonel Barry's point, we've seen great success with telework. We're working through how to best use these tools. And so the cameras are another extension of how do we manage the bandwidth that we need to go execute that. And then how do we use these tools that are now in place? MS Teams or the WebEx FedRAMP version, there's some other ones that we're looking at as well. And so I do see that regardless of the next 4 or 5 months and as folks flow back in and how we get back to a normal state, I do see telework as being an integral part of what we do as we move to the future, because we've shown that we can do it. And we're going to be using these tools, so we need to figure out how to use them now, and we need to figure out how to incorporate the appropriate bandwidth or cameras, because it really does add an essential element to it when, as Colonel Berry said, you're not just looking at some initials or some blank screen, but there's just something different when you see somebody's face and you can see their reactions and you can see their body language and you really understand where they are in the nature of the discussion that you're having. So with that, I'll transition to the next question. It was a question that had to do with mandatory vaccines and resuming work on the arsenal. And I would just tell you that I don't know anything specifically about vaccines or programs or returns that are associated with it. What I would encourage anybody to do who sees things in the news and they're not sure of what it says or the validity of the source is go to the DoD COVID website. The DoD COVID website has all of the information posted. There's a frequently asked questions section underneath it. It has all the policies on it. The Army has replicated it. We have it on our SharePoint page as well. But if you cull through that and you look through that information, it really talks about all the policies and procedures that are in place and then what we'll be doing, because we will certainly be nested and aligned with precisely the guidance that comes out from the Secretary of Defense, DoD, down through the Secretary of the Army, and then here within both ASALT and then the mission commander, the senior mission commander, Lieutenant General Daly, here for Redstone Arsenal.
Fantastic. So I've got one. What is the policy at Sparkman Center regarding temperature readings? Will re-entry be permitted throughout the day? Is there a way to confirm who passed temperature checks? So this ties into our previous conversation 2 weeks ago now, that we are, and I'll reiterate, we're going to continue to work across the Redstone Arsenal to make sure that we have a synchronized reconstitution plan. In other words, when we do start bringing folks back into the office, what does that look like? In our last town hall, I had mentioned we were exploring a mandatory temperature check, and I think we're going away from that now, but what I will say is we'll have the ability to check temperatures within the PEO formation and facilities. So Sparkman is one part of that, and I think that's what this specific question was. AMCOM is the owner of Sparkman, and we are working with them before we come out with our official policy for bringing folks back in. What I will tell you is another change from 2 weeks ago is we did get authorization now to procure masks. So that was one of the numerous questions we received in feedback. So we will be procuring masks. So masks will be available for our personnel when we do return to the office. And then another key stipulation in our reconstitution policy is the importance of the PMs and the folks who run the facilities to address appropriate social distancing, to include perhaps how folks are walking, a lot like you see in the grocery stores with the arrows. So all those things are being considered, and it's all within a wrapper of no rush to necessarily get large groups of folks back in the office, as well as our continued ability to execute our mission while in a max telework. There was a follow-on question in a similar way. What is PEO Aviation's position on gathering the workforce in an enclosed workspace with recirculating air while COVID-19 is still active? Are there any plans to extend telework? Are the contract actions needed for contractors? Are there any contract actions required? So to the last question first, we're not aware of there being any need for contractors to have additional stipulations put into their contract for telework. As ever, if that's not the case or someone feels like they're constrained by their contract, I'd ask them to come up through their leadership to make that clear to us so that we could address it at that point. And again, I think I just reiterate, there is not a rush. There is a PEO policy on having large groups of folks in a place with recirculating air, and it will not happen. So I'll just reiterate that, and I know you've heard that from Mr. Mason, but no one is going to be put in a position, again, safety of the workforce, number one priority, and we'll continue to address that as we go forward.
All right. I know there's been a lot of questions. Actually, there's a lot of activity right now about desktop applications for MS Team and telework and the use of Jabber, and I will get to those in just a second. But before that, there was a question that came in, and also something that came in from Facebook about travel, and specifically summer travel. We're coming up on Memorial Day. Am I restricted from traveling? So certainly I will let Colonel Berry address the specifics for the military officers and NCOs that we have within PEO Aviation. But really for the rest of us, it really comes down to a personal responsibility. The personal responsibility, and that's part of the reason why these guidelines were put out, not just for the number of people that you're around, but the way that you conduct your behavior, how you practice your social distancing, and what you do to protect yourself, but also protect your teammates. And so certainly we expect that there'll be some family gatherings as we get into the summer months. We know that people have vacations that have been planned. We know that people will travel. And what we ask folks to do is demonstrate the personal responsibility necessary so that you protect yourself, your family, and your teammates here at PEO Aviation. And that really ties into, well, what if I have to travel and I go TDY, or what if I have FMS customers and they have to travel? Are quarantine rules going to apply? And what I would tell you right now is, yes, there is an expectation that quarantine rules would apply if you've gone out and done this travel. So we recently had a case where we needed to go out and do some soldier touch points. That particular unit and that particular command has instituted a 14-day quarantine for anybody that goes to that unit to do training with soldiers, because certainly their objective, first and foremost, is to protect the force and then do the training. And so that's part of what we've had to integrate into the timelines that are going to be executed. And so we do expect this to continue. Obviously, as situations change, more information is garnered, we understand the conditions, then those can be alleviated as we go forward. But as of right now, to a large extent, this is personal responsibility with your personal travel. And then we have some very specific stipulations that are out there associated with any traveling that's done with the TDY duty, FMS duty, anything where you're in an official capacity for this organization. Colonel Berry, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
I do, thanks, right. And so specifically to the military, we have received questions, and I think in advance of these summer plans that folks may have, and we will look at those on a case-by-case basis. So for now, the 100-mile, to specifically answer the question, the 100-mile radius continues to apply. So specifically, if you go outside of that, our intention is to have folks not re-engage the workforce for the 14 days, just to ensure the safety of the workforce. So that will continue. What we will do, as always, is look at family needs and individuals' needs, and I'm talking specifically to the military, and address those, right? And if someone has a desire to go outside of that 100 miles, we'll certainly hear about it, listen to it, and we'll make a case-by-case determination. So what I'd ask is, inside the PM formations through the chain of command, to work those between the XO and myself, working with Mr. Mason. We'll make appropriate determinations, and as you might imagine, or should imagine, they will be done in a thoughtful and considered manner. So thank you for that.
So I was going to transition to some of the questions that have come in. So we did have another question that had to do with just self-quarantine and the 100 miles. I think we've already addressed that. And then there was another one that was about the MS Teams desktop application. So we actually were discussing that right before this meeting. So we will get you an answer on the desktop application. I will tell you that the MS Teams app can be downloaded to any portable device that you have. So I have an issued iPad, I have an issued iPhone, I have MS Teams on that because of the way that the commercial virtual remote environment is set up. It allows me to use both those devices to be able to communicate within MS Teams. And so I've been able to very effectively do that whether I've been in the office here or I've actually been at home, and I've been able to participate in meetings. We've also been able to share files via that. We've also been able to share screens with that as well. And actually, Colonel Berry and I spent a Saturday morning rehearsing how to do MS Teams because, quite honestly, we didn't want to come in on Monday morning and look like we didn't know how to actually use it. So we actually rehearsed a little bit one Saturday morning and just had to pass information back and forth. Somebody else also posted, and it was a good tip, on Cisco Jabber. So Cisco Jabber is another tool that you've got. You can use it for messaging, but you can also use it for screen sharing within the application that you have there. And I actually use Cisco Jabber for almost all of my dial-in calls because I find that when I use that VoIP line, I consistently am able to get in on all of my telecoms, whether I'm at home or I'm in the office. I do that, and then it also gives me the ability to also message with the other members of the team when I'm on Cisco Jabber. So it provides kind of a chat functionality, even if you're not up like a WebEx. You can use that within Cisco when you're on telework. And I'm not sure, Colonel Berry, you want to add anything to your telework experience in using these applications?
No doubt about it. So I'm certainly was pushing the envelope, and I think one thing I would add, I've seen some, hey, is there a Microsoft Teams guru? And we'll take that one and make sure we get it out, because I think various folks have been using it and some to better degrees than others. One thing specifically to Microsoft Teams is works significantly better outside of the network, so not VPN'd in. It works significantly better, so that's one tip there. And I think just to get out of your comfort zone, right? So my comfort zone was not in using all these different applications and specifically tying in multiple mobile devices. So I would ask you to continue to push that envelope, and even if it means a little experimentation, maybe not on a Saturday, but if you find me some time to connect up with a peer and run through all the different options, I think you'll find yourself being significantly less frustrated.
Yeah, and I would say on a Saturday, right, I know some people are probably saying, maybe you guys need to get a life.
Those doors, right.
Yeah, for Colonel Barry, it may have seemed work. I'm a little bit of a techno geek, so I actually enjoyed it. It was, I would have been playing around on Saturday trying to figure it out anyway. So it worked into my morning schedule and have a cup of coffee and sit there and figure out how to do MS Teams. There's also been another question that came up about can you use personal devices. So I will tell you that I do for some of these things, because you do not need a VPN or a Global Protect connection. You do not need to be on the network. We're not dealing with FOUO information, and we're having a conversation with someone or just a chat, right? Instead of picking up the phone and calling somebody, just to be able to do it almost like we're doing a counseling session. And I say counseling, but really a discussion, career mentoring, as if it's in the office. I use my personal device for that. And then certainly there are some stipulations associated with using personal devices. And what we will do is we'll send that all back out again so everybody understands that. But I will say that for many that are out in the organization, they already have personal devices, they have CAT card readers, and then they access the web applications, much like the DoD webmail that allows you to get your mail access on a commercial device. And then I will follow up again, though, there are some personal responsibilities that you have associated with that, and you need to ensure that you've read the policies that are associated with the use of personal devices. And certainly we are not telling you have to use a personal device, but certainly they can be used if an individual decides to use those.
I can take that one. Another question, what do personnel who live outside the 100-mile radius to travel to Redstone, are they supposed to quarantine? So we had talked about that, I think, initially, but I'm glad we have the question and we can clarify any concerns. The intent really of the 100-mile radius, as Mr. Mason had described, is to protect our teammates. So we acknowledge that there are indeed folks who actually live and commute outside of that 100-mile radius on a day-to-day basis. So what we've said is to work that within the chain of command. So what the intent of that is if I normally do not go outside a 100-mile radius, and I go outside and interact with people that I would not normally interact with and come back, we're trying to protect the workforce. So it's a good question, and I appreciate the clarification. And let's see, and can we clarify 100-mile radius for civilians versus military? So we've talked about this a little bit. It's spirit and intent, right, of protecting the workforce. So the question was specifically, does that only apply to military or does it apply to civilians? It applies to everyone. The intent of that is for everyone in our workforce, because everyone in our workforce can potentially do harm to everyone else in our workforce. And there are different abilities for us to enforce it, that goes without saying, between the military and the civilians. But we're trying to really not get down that specific path, and instead trying to communicate the importance of us taking care of our fellow teammates. And by living and working inside that radius, we do our part in both protecting our workforce and controlling the virus itself. So I appreciate that.
And I'll amplify that just a little bit. When you look at our core workforce, the matrix workforce we have, and then contractors, right? All part of the PEO team, all essential to the PEO team. And really, from my perspective, when we have these discussions, I don't differentiate. When you look at restrictions on travel, there are certain things that the military does. But on the civilian side of the house, and when you look at the array of different folks we have in the organization, certainly we don't restrict your travel. We simply are providing guidance and then looking at how we can best protect the workforce, and you can protect your teammates as you come back in again. And so what I would encourage you to do again is just communicate with your supervisor. so that your supervisor understands your unique situation and what you need, what you want to go do, what you and your family are going to go do, and then as you come back, that you demonstrate the responsibility to your teammates in how you integrate back into the workforce and you carry on at work. So I know there was another question on ensuring adequate ventilation, and I don't have a specific answer for that right now. I know that what I can tell you is from our G4 perspective, we have had significant surveys done across all of our facilities as they've been remodeled, not only the headquarters building here, but also all of the facilities that we had, to look at all airflows, to look at all of the sanitary conditions, and to make sure that we had just what would be considered absolutely healthy facilities for people to work in. And all of those surveys that we've done over the period that I've been in the organization have been clean, and they've showed that this is a safe area to come to work every single day. So we could certainly follow back up with you a little bit on that, but I can tell you that Jim Bamberg, his team, and then the G4 team beforehand has taken that very seriously, particularly as we have some older facilities that have been renovated, and we always go back through those facilities again and have rigorous environmental surveys done of those, and we bring Garrison in to do those as well to ensure that the facilities are certified for everybody to safely operate in. So I know there was another question. I don't know if you want to take that, Colonel Barry.
Sure. Gates. What gates are open? So that's 1, 9, and 3, and let me make sure I get that's next to the PX. That's Martin Road, and that's Rideout Road, right? So those are the three, for those not familiar with the numbers or prefer the actual name. So, and you can also check with Garrison. There's Team Redstone updates regularly on that. But you know, to clarify, we're not trying to get anyone to come in. So it's more just answering the question of what gates are open on the auction.
Yeah, and I will reiterate, there's coming in on a full-time basis, and we've talked about the 7 days, and then there's when you need to come in because there's some work that needs to be accomplished. And certainly as we continue to execute the mission, that is still prevalent, and I see people coming in and out, but typically coming in for a couple of hours, doing what needs to be done, and then they head back home, and then they go back into a telework status as we go ahead and continue to execute this. But it is important, especially depending on where you live around the community, that you understand the gate schedule if you've got to come in here for a couple hours, so that you don't find yourself at a dead end having to turn around and then having to try to make your way via some other route into work for a short period of time. So I don't see any other questions that have come in necessarily, Jeremy. I'm looking over at Jeremy, and Jeremy is giving us the thumbs up. So I did want to reiterate one other thing before I turn it over to Colonel Berry for his closing comments, which was on the masks, if you missed it. So there was a lot of traffic on the last Facebook about masks and will they be provided, why won't they be provided. So we've worked through all of that over the last 2 weeks. We have all the masks on order right now, and so our expectation is that when folks come into work, we will have masks for everyone. We've got the hand sanitizer that's out. We've got cleaning equipment that's there. And so we have been successful in working through all of that, and I appreciate the help of the entire team in making sure that we're able to execute that. So with that, Colonel Berry, I'll turn it over to you for
Okay, fantastic. Well, no, I appreciate everyone's time and appreciate the opportunity to interact, and we'll look forward to continued questions as they come in. So the communication channels remain open back and forth between both through your chain of command, and you're always welcome to reach out directly. And look forward to continued conversations as we develop that reconstitution plan and make sure we adequately address everyone's concerns as we continue to evolve to whatever a new normal looks like. And I would, before I turn it over to Mr. Mason, I think everyone feels that as this has drawn on and on and on, that wear and tear on your spirit. So I know for myself, I love my hockey, and I usually get in at least a couple times a week, and have been unable to do that for 9 weeks. So that wears on you. So I'd ask you to find your way that you can make sure you're releasing some of those stresses, and whether it's PT or some other way to keep yourself mentally sound as we proceed. And I know Mr. Mason's going to touch some more on that. But honored to serve with you all, and I appreciate your time with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Colonel Berry. And And certainly, to Colonel Berry's point, right, we've talked about it beforehand on the balance, right, mind, body, spirit, as we continue to work through this. And especially this time of year, right, we're May. I mean, this is the time of year where, especially for those who have kids, right, sports banquets and championships that have gone on, and the dance recitals that didn't happen, the cancellation of those, and then graduation. So a lot of graduations that should be taking place right now. And in fact, my nephew, the nephew who refers to me as boring Uncle Pat, right, he just graduated this past weekend from Syracuse, and so had kind of the Zoom graduation. And so for us and our family, we're going to do a little bit of a Zoom celebration. In fact, it's tonight, so I'm going to leave work, go home. We all decided on what we're going to have to eat and drink for our little Zoom celebration. We're all going to get on Zoom, and we're going to celebrate and just celebrate the things that the family has accomplished, and the graduation of my nephew, even though he thinks I'm boring, right? He's actually a pretty great young man. And I just encourage you all to continue to do those things, right? But as Colonel Berry and I were joking around a little bit before this, spring, it's been a hard spring, right? And graduation's not taking place. And I think most folks know I'm not really from the Boston area, right? I grew up as a military brat, but most of my family was up in Boston, right? So in Bostonian terms, this is called a wicked hot spring, right? It's been wicked hot. Why has it been wicked hot, right? Well, if you're from the Boston area and you follow it up there, right, Tom Brady left and went to Florida. And Gronk came out of retirement and is joining him down there in Florida. So that's a stake in the heart. Rip the hot out of the city. The St. Patty's Day Parade was canceled. You couldn't lift a pint in a bar. They were all closed as well. And the Red Sox aren't playing in Fenway. No first pitch. But the one thing that I do know is that baseball will be back. We'll be fighting it out with the Yankees, which is always great fun. I will have a reason to stand up in front of my TV and yell at the baseball screen that's going on because the Sox are blowing the lead. And we'll be out playing football, and we'll be enjoying tailgating, and we will be back to all of those things. Because that's who we are. We're persistent, we're resilient, we're adaptable, and we're going to work through this. And again, I just can't tell you how incredibly proud I am to be associated with this organization. The work that each and every one of you do every single day. It is just tremendous to sit there and say that I am part of the PEO Aviation team. And I just want to thank you all for everything that you do for this organization, for our Army, and for this nation. Everybody have a great day, have a great weekend, and a belated Happy Mother's Day to all those mothers out there. Thanks for what you've done for all of us. Thanks.